Hi, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Aja Naomi King, star of Lessons in Chemistry, which currently streams on Apple. Asia, so nice to meet you.
Such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. This is fun. Lessons in Chemistry, you're playing Harriet Sloane, a character that is dramatically different on the TV show than from the novel in a very compelling way, I think. So when you look at the character in the show, what best helped you figure out how you would play her? What was most informative to you?
After reading the book and looking what we were trying to do with the script, I thought like, yes, the way I present is very different than the Harriet in the book, but at the heart of it, the essence of her is still the same. It's, that relationship that they have to one another, and that was something that I could very easily kind of delve into these relationships that women have, that connection, that understanding, that bonding, like going through similar things when it comes to marriage and motherhood and ambition and how we see ourselves versus how the world wants us to be seen. And I thought that there was so much in there that we were playing with, and I loved that they changed the Harriet to, being me, a young Black woman, because I also really felt like that expanded the world in this really beautiful way. And I also hadn't really seen anything where you are in the 50s and 60s and get to understand the perspective of what it was like for an aspirational Black woman who was an activist but also a mom, and just getting into like the tensions and the struggles of her life, but also celebrating her joys and her compassion. Um, so yeah, it's just like all of these things of getting to kind of just dive into the fullness of her being. And I was able to look to my own mother, who, like, her formative years were in the 50s and 60s, and understanding her experience, and thinking about conversations from my aunts and my nana, and just what that time period was like, especially for women who had enough vision to imagine something more for themselves.
Mhm. Was your own mother politically active as Harriet is in this piece?
Not so much. No. um, my mother was very creative in her own way. Like, she wasn't trying to change the system. She was just creating an environment where she could thrive. And in that sense, they're very much the same. Like, she used to like put on fashion shows with her sisters and stuff like that. And I was just like, wow, that was like New York in the 60s. But for Harriet, like, yeah, she's trying to make this impact and create this safety and community by changing the system that she is existing in and that her children are existing in. And yeah, and that's what I love about her, that she's so inspiring in that way, but she's not infallible, she's not perfect, she's still very human. And it was nice to like just get to dive into like her tension and her struggles. And yeah, she's not one dimensional. Like, I enjoyed exploring the multiplicity of her, especially when it comes to motherhood, which is such a blessing and such a gift, but can also be draining and exhausting, and you might want to run away from your child as well. Like, I love that it wasn't supposed to be all like, oh, like this is perfect and this is the example of perfection within these spaces. Yeah, just getting to explore all of that with Harriet.
It's fantastic. So you talk about the bond of motherhood. I mean, early on, well, halfway through the show, when Elizabeth Zott has Mad, Harriet sees a woman in trouble, my fellow mother in trouble, across the street, and they form a bond, to kind of uplift Elizabeth and kind of get her through this hardest phase of her life, being a single mother. Talk to me about building that relationship with Bree so that you guys could make that bond so incredibly compelling.
Yes. Well, and that's also like one of the great things about Brie. Like, she would be bringing games to set for everyone to play in between takes. Yeah, because it's right. It's this great kind of thing where like now we're just relating on a very human level and we're playing games that she was very good at. And
She only brings the game she's best at.
like, right? And like in me, not so much, but it was this nice way for all of us to kind of connect and have this shared experience so that when we were playing these scenes, it was like there was this energy underneath it all of that shared experience. And I do think it's so lovely when and I find this in motherhood myself, like the one thing that you realize you need so much is community, someone who understands the experience you're going through, especially when you start putting pressure on yourself to live up to this ideal of motherhood that's just not based in reality. And it's nice that they can like, that our characters, that Harriet and Elizabeth can look to one another and be grounded in something more real versus like this artificial idea of what this is supposed to look like or feel like.
Right. One of the things I find so interesting, I talked to the production designer a couple of months ago, and the Sloane house and the Evans house are very different spaces. One is very and becomes increasingly different as Elizabeth transforms it into her own laboratory. But one is very clinical, very just makeshift. This is a necessity for me to have in terms of living while I go work at Hastings. And the Sloane house is warm. The colors are completely different. The colors are amber hues, and it just feels so warm and inviting. Did that environment help you find Harriet Sloane?
Yes. And also just the collaborative nature of this project because they let me proliferate, excuse me, they let me proliferate the house with photos of my actual family. Like,
Oh wow.
yeah, I brought in my Nana's photo albums. And so, like, the pictures on the walls are of my mother and father when they were like 4 and 5 years old. And there are pictures that I have up of like aunts who like graduated high school and my grandma Joe getting married. And all of this is around me. So I literally felt like I was surrounded by family. I was truly in a family home, my family home. And it was warm and it's deeply rooted in this history, just by that alone. And it just speaks volumes to the set deck and how collaborative they were in creating an environment for me where no matter where I turned, it was like, oh, like like these people aren't just like, stock photos. Like this is my family. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Because again, it's that thing about like energy, like creating that warmth that's like real and genuine because it's coming from a very real place.
Mhm. Absolutely, and I love the fact that you put your own family photos there because it even underscores that warmth and that familiarity. And I can't imagine, if there were ever nerves walking onto a set like that and having family look at you while you're doing your job, it would make it so much easier, I would think.
Right, it does, like this is exactly why people take photos of their kids to the office. It's like this is who we're doing this for, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. This is who I'm representing. This is who, is
Yeah,
important to me and care and help me carry through the day. Um,
exactly.
Another difference between the book, obviously, is the relationship between Harriet and her husband here in this show, Charlie. He comes back from Korea, and they're not at war, they're not at odds as they are in the book, right? This is a challenged but loving relationship, and it remains that through the show. What did you find unique or particularly refreshing about the way it was written?
I just really love that they found a way to show, like, even in within a marriage, that at the core of it, there is so much love that there could also exist so much tension and strife and struggle. They independently want the same thing, I think, which is safety for themselves and for their children and the ability to flourish, but they have completely opposite ideas of how to achieve that. And I just feel like that is so real in human nature, in relationships in general. Like, I love my husband, but that doesn't mean that we're the same person. That doesn't mean
Right.
we see everything the same way. And so just getting to underscore that with, not just one scene, but like multiple scenes and hints at like, kind of this like unease between these two people, but that at the base of it is like this deep love and desire for like understanding and wanting to be close. And it was fun to play that. And the guy that played my husband, Paul James, just such a phenomenal actor, and I felt very attached from him from the very beginning because he is so lovely and warm and open. We had a really great time kind of just exploring what the dynamic was in this marriage. Because, for Harriet, a lot of it has been like, everything that she has done has been in service of his career or in service of their children. And like, he comes back and it's finally to the point for her where she's like, it's my turn. It's time for you to be in service of me and to reciprocate all that I've been giving. And he only kind of does that. He doesn't stop her from like pursuing her legal degree and going after the housing commission, but he also doesn't slow down his work to be a support. So then the burden of still like handling the children and being in the home like it typically does falls on the woman. And I think that's where that friendship with Elizabeth is so important, because that's someone who can understand it on a different level of what it is to be a woman, while for Harriet's husband, he understands like what it is to be black, and Harriet is like straddling both of these places and trying to emerge, free of all of it, and to just want to like exist, enjoy, and and enjoy the same rights as everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about the show is that, obviously there was a theme of this in the book, but the show handles it in different ways, which is the female power, female empowerment, taking authority, taking agency in your own life as a woman. Elizabeth obviously has her journey. Harriet has her own journey, and related to the freeway, which culminates in this really, I found difficult to watch scene where the protest happens at the freeway. Can you talk to me about the emotions of that moment and filming that moment?
Yeah, that was, I mean, it's hard with a show like this because you film so many things and it all feels so beautiful. But this, the way we captured that was just, I was so deeply moved by how we were able to honor what people actually went through.
Mhm.
And it's like you see the footage and you know the stories and you understand the experience, but there is something about being in that costume and being on an actual freeway and the police cars and then the violence right in front of you, and if you've ever been to a protest, you understand that there is like something sacred in that space of you are trying to collectively achieve something together, and you know that it has to be done in a certain way, but you just don't quite know how to successfully get there to convince people to be on your side. And so all of us together on that freeway holding space for one another in what feels like the unknown, because we didn't really know the choreography that our director, Millicent Shelton, was going to have, like the officers and some of the stunt people do. So then she did a phenomenal job of, like, I think, capturing our very initial reactions of like the shock of like seeing that so close right in front of you, knowing that could be you. um you just feel it so deeply, like I think it lives inside of you, and then like playing pretend, like it doesn't feel like artifice because like you're really there and
Right.
this happened, it's real, so it feels that much more real in acting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine too, approaching this character Harriet, knowing that this was the way it was going to end. This was very likely an outcome. But Elizabeth not knowing that, Elizabeth being
Mhm.
horrified at the at witnessing and as being a part of that, and having it touch Harriet but not touch her. That is That is another I found incredibly powerful moment of that scene.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many levels and nuance to it that, and I actually really just commend what we were able to achieve on that day because so much of it is done without language.
Right.
You know, like we're not given words in these moments, but so much is conveyed just across our faces, and you feel so much, and I think it really does read because it was just shot so beautifully and the details were so precise, um that I think our audience anyways were it was able to resonate with them.
For sure. I'm interested in this idea, and I have a thought, a theory about Harriet after the series, right? So Harriet does not win this fight. Obviously, the freeway proceeds, but I don't think that the fire to enact social change died in her at that moment. You know, kind of where do you take her a year after the end of the show?
I couldn't agree more. I agree that Harriet, like, this is the only way she knows to exist in the world, which is to do something, and we see that when we first meet her and she's, having these interactions with Calvin, like asking for help, but she's a doer. She's always going to do something. When she's upset about the obituary and she goes to Elizabeth, she's like, no, we have to do something because it's not right. And like she has such moral integrity about what's right. She's going to commit her life to try to make things better and to make things right. And so, yes, like they lose the fight against the Freeway Commission. The neighborhood is decimated, but I do think she will take her legal background and understanding and try to create a system, a community of people that will be able to help others that are like fighting larger corporations or trying to save their homes in other areas. Like she's always going to seek out the underdog and do her best to just lend a helping hand and show them how they can take action. And that's what makes her so inspiring because in that way you can never defeat her because she's
Right.
always going to fight.
Right. Last question for you. When you look back at this project and you think about pulling from your mother's life, pulling from her experience, having those family members there with you in the house, in the Sloane house, as you're filming those scenes, going through this difficult sequence at the freeway, did that change you at all? Did it change the way that you look at the world and social justice and social change today?
It does. Like it reminds me, my very first thought was how painful it is that we are still fighting.
Mhm.
And then it became, but how beautiful it is that there are so many more people fighting alongside us. And that for me has been the greatest takeaway, that the biggest change over time is that we're all a little less alone in terms of how we fight and where we fight. That there are people that are joining with us there, that are banding together, that are believing with one another that they can enact change and that we can do it together.
Beautiful. Well, Asia, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the performance. It's outstanding work. And you didn't have to get doused in blood like you did for How to Get Away with Murder.
Right.
I was doing some research and I ran across a video where you were watching a scene with some other cast members and you're all laughing at how soaked you were. It was really funny.
Yes, got to be very clean in this one. So
Yeah.
that was really nice.
Well, thank
Yes.
you so much. Best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.